ready?
Got open man. DJ Moore. End zone. Touchdown. Touchdown Bears.
I am Jeff Joniak.
Blitz is on. Down he goes. Oscar.
What was it like playing for Coach Ditka?
I don't want to answer any questions like that.
Pressure coming. He's in big trouble. Down he goes. Montez Sweat.
And now, Bears Etc. brought to you by Miller Lite with the voices of the Bears, Jeff Joniak and Tom Thayer.
Well, it's been an impactful business season so far for the Bears with significant additions on both sides of the ball as Ben Johnson starts to brand his 2025 Bears with new leadership in the trenches. With Super Bowl winning Bears guard Tom Thayer, Jeff Joniak, episode 136 of the Bears Etc. podcast, and we're brought to you by Miller Lite. Our special guest today will be Brandon Thorn. He works for the Scouting Academy, hosts the Trench Warfare podcast, and contributes to EstablishTheRun.com as an offensive and defensive line analyst. But Tommy, good to talk to you. Since our last podcast, Bears have added more blood. Wide receiver Olamide Zaccheaus won games with Atlanta, Philadelphia, and Washington last year. Sees himself fitting as a slot, but with the ability to move outside. And what I love about him, he gets after it as a blocker in the run game. He's not shy about telling you that.
Well, you know, one thing I like about Zaccheaus is he's come into the league as a free agent. And free agents, Jeff, they stay hungry. They never can rest or rely on their draft positioning when they came into the league. It's about what can you do to help this football team? How can you allow your production to show that you're important to the coaching staff? And every one of these guys know, because of the warning of Ben Johnson, no block, no rock. So these guys that are being considered in the free agent market at the receiver position, they know that they have to come in here because their role of helping block in the running game and helping block in the passing game is equal as important as them catching the football.
Hey, you're going to like this guy. I sat down with him this week at Hallis Hall and just super excited. He really connected with Anton Randall. How could you not? That guy is full of energy and optimism, but he's intrigued again. Everybody that has followed Ben Johnson knows that he's creative. That was one of the first words he brought up, is the creativity aspect of it. And think about it. You had a new OC last year. 3 teams in 3 years now with the Bears, but in Washington, they had a new OC, new additions, a rookie quarterback, and he had a career year last year, receiving. So I'm excited about what he can bring to the table.
Well, it proves to me that you're engaged, because you have to be engaged when you're going through new offensive coordinators and a new quarterback. You have to make sure that you pay attention in the meeting so you can bring it out onto the field and then be productive. And I think that's as important as anything that you do on the practice field, is making sure you're paying attention to the details in the meeting room. And then I think that opens the eyes of the coordinators and the coaches that say, okay, this guy has the ability to absorb a lot of information and be instrumental in a game plan or developing a play process that can be super creative.
All right, so he comes from Atlanta this time around with some background as well. So he played in 2020, 2021 with Drew Dahlman and also Grady Jarrett, so he knows those cats very well, so that gives him some ease knowing some folks. But he went to high school with DeAndre Swift, and I remember doing a story with DeAndre Swift last season about his roots in Philadelphia. Olamide corrected me. I said, you know, I always kind of circle Philadelphia guys because they play with a certain edge. DJ Moore does as well. He's from Philadelphia. He goes, now, wait a minute. I went to the same high school in Philadelphia with DeAndre. I'm from Jersey. I go, what's the difference? You got tough guys in Jersey, tough guys in Philadelphia.
You got tough guys in the NFL because these guys, you know, they kind of see what's in front of them when they start high school football and what the possibilities could be when they go into the college football and what their dreams are realized when they get a chance to play professional football. So that's kind of the ladder of approval that you climb. And if you're fortunate to play with a guy in high school and a couple of guys in college that make it up into the NFL, that's equally as gratifying as you making it yourself.
His catch rate last year with Jaden Daniels, over 70% on 64 targets. He had 26 first downs. He had his career high in yards after the catch with 284. And then, you know, let's focus on this because, you know, the Bears have been going through trying to find a regular punt returner. DeAndre Carter a year ago, he doesn't appear to be in the plans this year, so there will be some competition. And Zaccheaus was a punt returner last year, 10.5 on his 17 returns with a long of 24. I mean, I will take the 10.5 for sure. But there is going to be a good competition there for the punt returner. I'm sure there'll be more ads And you always count on a rookie coming in as a possibility. As a lot of guys, special teams coordinators, they don't love having rookie punt returners, but if you get one that's done it at college at a high level and they were sure-handed, that's the key. You got to be sure-handed, which Zaccheaus is.
One thing about coming to the Bears and trying to fit into the role of the punt returner, you're out there practicing these open fields, and Tory Taylor is banging these punts that have over 5-second hang time. That's super challenging because it challenges your focus, your ability to adjust in the wind, and just, finding the football with that added hang time and make sure that you have the concentration to make the catch, the control, and then the return after. It's one of the biggest positions on the football team to be a punt returner because that's some of the biggest plays throughout the course of the year. And I like to see competition at the returner before settling on whom that person will be during the regular season.
All right, we also have the long snapper locked up for this 2025 season. Scott Daly did a nice job digging into some of the research. Pro Football Focus had him as the highest graded long snapper in the NFL last season. No inaccurate snaps on field goals and extra points, 2 on 84 punt tries, didn't miss a tackle, and he set a career high in tackles. He had 5 tackles on special teams. He's moving the Downers Grove native, getting down the field. So I'm happy for him, Tom. He's 31 years old. He's played with the Lions for a few years, but he's bounced around from the XFL to the AAF. So he's paid his dues, and he played all 17 games last year, and you want that consistency for the operation for Santos, obviously, and Terry Taylor.
Yeah. It's Cairo and Taylor. They're the most excited about it because Tory Taylor, he's a guy that had to come in and learn how to hold for Cairo, and he did a fantastic job at it last year. But to have that consistency from the snapper that's the key ingredient in the operation for the kicker and the punter. So I'm super happy for Scott Daly. And, when you talk about one of the more difficult jobs to find and earn in the NFL is that of a long snapper, because you got 32 of those jobs. They're not having backup long snappers, and they don't have a roster full of them. Every team has one. And if you're, talented enough to earn that opportunity, what a blessing it is for Scott.
Yep. And we forgot the most important part. He's a domer, Tommy. He's a domer.
Well, that goes without saying.
He's a domer.
That's long snap you. I would like you to start referring to that.
What, long snap you, tight end you? What else you got?
Yeah.
All right.
Offensive tackle you.
All right.
You look at some of the tackles out there right now in the league.
All right.
No.
I'm okay with that. I can. Yeah. I'll allow it. I'll allow it, Tommy. Travis Homer back. Tommy gets a 1-year deal. Really didn't touch the ball much, I think 9 times overall in the run and pass game last year. But, he's reliable and a core player on special teams. I'm sure Richard Hightower's thrilled about this. Homer is a tough dude. He's rocked up. He's going to be a guy in the weight room every year. And they're really keeping that special teams coverage unit together when you think about Josh Blackwell, you think about Tarvarius Moore, you think about Daniel Hardy, who was right at the top, you think about Aman Agbam-Gamiga, and now you think about Travis Homer. Those are key elements that you don't have to mess with. They already know each other. They got a plan, and they like playing for Coach Hightower.
But, one thing about Homer, though, that you never see on the game field is how hard he works in the demonstration squad. So every guy in a backup role, they have to play their part in when they're demonstrating the opponent's offense. And when you can get a quality running back that can go out there and be that person week in and week out and change a little bit about your game according to the type of guy you're playing, I think that's something that goes unappreciated on game day.
This podcast is brought to you by the official beer partner of your Chicago Bears. Tastes like Miller Time, Chicago. Go to MillerLite.com/BearsPod to find delivery options near you. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces. And we're brought to you by PNC, official bank of the Bears. Tom, did you do anything for the St. Patty's celebration? No one does it like Chicago. I was down there. Wow, city was cranked up. It was. It felt like 75, 80 degrees out there at times, and then snow the next morning. I couldn't believe looking out the window.
I know. Sunday I didn't do a lot. Had the dogs outside, gave them a little bit of their opportunity to run around and enjoy each other's company. And then Monday I had another physical therapy session, which I'm chipping away at those. Only a couple more, ready to rock and roll. And I'm not Irish, so I've never been big into that holiday. Although when I did go to Notre Dame, St. Patrick's Day was a big event there.
Next year, you're invited to run around with me downtown Chicago. You know how many Bears fans came up to me so excited about the offensive line? They didn't want to talk about anything. Last year, they wanted to talk about Caleb Williams, and they'd stop you out and about. This year, only about the offensive line. Some people, I think somebody's written it too. It's the new Great Wall of Chicago offensive line, the Great Wall of Chicago, the interior three. Have you gotten that too from everybody? Because they only want to talk about the O-line now.
Listen, when I go to physical therapy a few times a week, the only topic in the building from the time I get in there till the time I leave, both with the rehabilitation people and the patients in there, it's all Bears all day. And that's all they want to talk about. And it's kind of funny that you just brought it up because it's not a lot of Caleb conversation. It's more Ben Johnson and the new personnel brought in and some of the new assistant coaches. And listen, I'm happy to have a conversation with every one of these guys because I think it makes all of our physical therapy go a little faster, and it's always a subject that's at the top of their mind when we get in the building.
We should also remind everybody you had a knee replacement. I don't want people thinking you slipped on ice or something and hurt, blew out a hip or something. No, you had knee surgery. And so in the end, how did you handle that? You've had a lot of surgeries in your life, obviously, mostly on your back, but you had a couple hips. Now you had a knee. How'd it go?
It's been great. My biggest mistake was the second day out of surgery. Some of the block that they put in was still working, so I thought I was feeling better than I was, and then I stopped taking the pain meds. And the second night was one of the hardest nights ever in my life. But since then, I've been responsible. The physical therapy, it's painful, but it's beneficial. So I'm up, walking, ready to roll, and get this thing behind me.
Are aches, pains, or injuries keeping you on the sidelines? Athletico's movement experts are here to help you turn your setbacks into comebacks and create a personalized game plan for your recovery. With no prescription or referral needed, Athletico Physical Therapy is where your comeback story begins. Athletico is proud to be the official physical therapy partner of the Chicago Bears. Athletico is proud to be the official physical therapy partner of the Chicago Bears. Perfect timing to talk about.
I'm telling you though, man, physical therapy though if anybody out there has surgery, do not skip it and pay attention to them. Have a tremendous amount of respect for the physical therapist because that is your quickest solution to getting all this behind you.
Yep, got to take the doctor's advice, that's for sure. Okay, so I brought up the offensive line. Let's dig in a little bit now that you've had time to dwell on it and soak it all in with Drew Dahlman at center, flanked by Joe Thuney at left guard and Jonah Jackson at right guard, and then Darnell Wright, guaranteed right tackle there. What is your thoughts? What are your thoughts? What is your mindset? Are you even more excited after thinking about it and doing more research?
100%, because you're talking about experience and quality experience. These guys that they have a background of such high professionalism that they can do a lot to help Caleb Williams and the entire offense. And they can also do a lot to help Darnell Wright. Make sure you get an understanding of how these guys come in prepared, how they pay attention in meetings, and then how they carry it out to the OTAs. Because all these guys are going to have a hand in teaching each other about this new offense that they're going to be installing. And I think the competitiveness of the position is probably the most important element of it. We have the elder statesmen on the line of scrimmage right now, and some of these guys are still young as elder statesmen, but how much that can speed up the learning curve from the guys that are on the second team and guys that are trying to develop in their own position. So I'm super excited to see at the start of the regular season. I'm not going to sit there and go, oh my God, this is the best OTA offensive line I've ever seen. When they get ready for the regular season and they know they got to start fast and kick this thing off as quickly as possible, that's when I'll be excited to see it all come together.
Well, as much as anything, and I got to throw in Grady Jarrett on the other side of the ball, the leadership component. I know we've talked about it. We talked about it in Bears Weekly, having a guy like Thuney, It sounds like Jonah Jackson can be a leader as well. Dahlman at center can be a leader. So there's just more voice, a louder voice, I would say, in the offensive and defensive line rooms now. You're going to watch Grady Jarrett practice. I can't wait to see that. That's one of my top 5 already at training camp. Want to see what he brings to the table because I've heard he's high motor, high energy, volume, the whole bit. And it's not just bravado. It's not just to be a loud influence. This is how we're going to practice. We're going to take it from the classroom to the field. This is how we're going to practice. This is the way I did it in Atlanta my entire career.
Right. First of all, for the offensive guys, I expect all those guys to be leaders and lead by example and production. So I'm excited to see what they do for the whole offensive line. But I always like Grady Jarrett, man. I've always loved this guy as a player. I like his dimensions. I like his enthusiastic approach to being great. I like when he was at the podium and he talked about how when he knew he had a knee injury, his first goal was to attack the rehabilitation process and get right back to the top of his game. And he's done exactly that. But I think when you look at a guy like Grady and the way he sits at the podium, that enthusiasm can really spill over to the rest of these guys. And that's the type of attitude you need for a guy like Dexter, a guy like Zach Pickens. You need that to spill all the way to the defensive ends, not only to an elder statesman like Montez Sweat, to a young guy like Austin Booker. So I think him coming aboard here in this new adventure with a new head coach, it's got to be as exciting and kind of revigorating for a veteran like Grady.
Yeah. For sure. And he's coming off that ACL in 2023. Managed to get back in time for training camp last year. I would think that another year removed from it, particularly post 30, it's significant. I think he's probably going to feel a lot better in 2025 maybe than he did in 2024, which leads us to this because, and we've dabbled in this talking about the number 10 pick, and we don't know. He might move down. He might move up. Who knows? Ryan Poles is a guy who's he's been masterful at working the draft board in his time with the Bears. But Larry Mayer of ChicagoBears.com just did another sample of what everyone's predicting in terms of draft analysts. So the overwhelming favorite right now is Kelvin Banks, the tackle out of Texas. Bucky Brooks, whom we've had on this podcast. We respect his work. Charles Davis, likewise. Fox Sports, Daniel Jeremiah from NFL Network and the College Football Network, all going with Kelvin Banks, the tackle from Texas. Any thoughts on Kelvin Banks as one of the top choices? And most of them are offensive linemen, with the exception of one that has picked Ashton Genty from Boise State at running back.
Well, Mel Kiper Jr., he came out with the draft today and had a completely different pick in mind. But, Kelvin Banks, I like him. I think that he's the type of guy that if you come in here and if you're immediately inserted in the lineup or you're, waiting to develop the skills and the talent it takes to start as an offensive lineman, whether you're, having an opportunity to play against Joe Thuney, what an opportunity for your career that would be, because there's so much intelligence inside the head of Thuney that could help an offensive tackle develop at such a faster pace that if you have the skill, you have the feet, you have the ability and the desire, you're talking about a piece that you could put in place for the next 10 years and work right alongside Caleb and Rome and Darnell and the rest of these offensive linemen for a decade to come. But, Jeff, I've probably seen 30 different mock drafts.
Yeah.
And there is such a difference in the top 10 picks that there's no guarantee that if you see, 10, one guy in place with 5 of the mock drafts, that guaranteed that's going to be the guy. There is no obvious. There is no guy that it's a guarantee that he's going to be there. So I think for us leading up to the draft and the night of the draft, it's going to be one of the more interesting nights considering the way we walked into the draft last year.
Yeah. There was no uncertainty.
You're doing a live interview with Caleb Williams that looked like he was coming in a telephone booth. Everybody in the Bears at that party knew exactly what was going to happen. So I think there's a little bit more uncertainty this year.
A couple of people picked Missouri tackle Armand Membo, Pro Football Network and CBS Sports Network, and then LSU tackle Will Campbell, Newsweek, and Ryan Wilson of CBS Sports, and Ohio State tackle Josh Simmons, the choice for Lance Zierlein, who also does draft analysis for NFL.com. So heavy tackle.
But Mel, he picked Mikel Williams.
Oh, Mikel Williams. Yeah.
So, and then there's a couple of those guys.
Yeah. Of course.
Are interesting. And, if that perfect tackle wasn't there for Ryan, or Ryan said, hey, maybe there's this guy that early in the second round that I could grab as well. So, I think you got to have your sights on everybody in this draft, and no guarantee it's going to be a tackle. I want a tackle, but there's a couple of other interesting defensive players out there that could really give you an explosive defensive line.
Yes, indeed. All right, with that being said, we now shift to Brandon Thorn, our guest today this week on Bears Etc. Brandon, thanks for taking the time and joining us. I love your background. This is an audio-only podcast for those who are downloading this podcast, so we can't see the visual, but he's got Laramie Tunsil's jersey up there. He's got the big bad boy from Notre Dame, Indianapolis, Nelson right over his noggin, and Jensen, the former nasty center of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Man, Brandon, I've wanted to talk to you for a long time. I got to start with where you got started. I already billboarded where you work at, and that's a bunch of places, but you focus on the offensive, defensive lines. How did you get into this?
Yeah, so just a diehard football fan, NFL fan, all that sort of stuff growing up. But I played high school football, offensive line my last few years. And so I got a little bit of a taste of it in Florida, where I grew up. Had some opportunities to play at some like Division I AA type schools, but I decided to join the military instead. But so I was in the Air Force for 10 years, and during my time in, I just became even a bigger football fan, and eventually had the opportunity to get out early of a contract due to downsizing, and I wanted to I did that to pursue my dream of being in NFL scouting. So team building, I've always been fascinated with that. So I got out in 2014 and just basically joined social media just out of nowhere, just tried to build my name that way. Worked for free for a while, met some people, doors got open for me through my big one was really like Ted Sundquist. He was a former general manager of the Broncos, also an Air Force veteran. He had a website that I wrote for free for a couple years, and he kind of took me under his wing. We did a podcast together, and then I got linked up with LaCharles Bentley through that, and then also Duke Manyweather. And, I always loved offensive line, and I realized when I was on social media, nobody was talking about offensive line at that time, really. So I figured, if I could carve out a space here, there's an opportunity for me to do that. So I just really started to dive into the position, learn more about it, go to clinics, things like that. The Scouting Academy was another big piece of my journey to teach me how to write scouting reports. And, one thing led to another. Eventually I was able to get some paid work. And then, the last 5-6 years or so, it's been full time. So I'm doing it full time, offensive, defensive line, scouting, analysis, and different things, some contracting. And yeah, it's really cool. It's a niche, but it's something I love. And, I love shining a light on the position, on the trenches.
Right before you came on, Jeff and I were talking about the wide variety of picks up and down this draft. And to me, it's kind of one of the more confusing drafts as well. Is there an obvious first tackle to you in this draft, or is there a variety of picks in your head as well, depending upon the team you go to?
There's really two guys I think that stand out to me the most. My two highest graded players overall. That's LSU's Will Campbell and Missouri's Armand Membo. So, I've been kind of in the camp of thinking that Campbell ideally is playing guard in the NFL, a la like Brandon Scherf, that kind of really good college left tackle, kick him inside, and you have a really good guard. Now, I do see a pathway to him sticking at tackle, especially in, the NFL today. Tackle is a position, there's a lot of scarcity. So even if you could get a solid tackle, maybe not an all-pro or a pro bowler, but if you get a really solid tackle like a Braden Smith, maybe a Bernard Raymond, that kind of level of guy. I think Will Campbell could be that guy. So it just kind of depends on the team, I think more than anything. There's some teams picking in the top 10 that need a tackle, and he'll probably play tackle, but I see an even better guard. But he's my top rated guy overall either way. You want him on your team regardless. And then Membu is the one who maybe has a little bit more upside there, a little bit more explosiveness to his game, fluidity in his movement. Not that Campbell's a bad athlete by any means. He's a really good athlete. I just see Membu having a little bit more twitch and power to his game, but he's not quite as polished either. But he's definitely a first-round pick, more of kind of a true tackle, in my opinion. So those are the two guys I think that you're picking from. And then I have another tackle that I like a good amount, a little bit more questions there, and that's Josh Simmons from Ohio State, who I have kind of as like a fringe first-round grade. And that's because of a couple things. He's coming off a patella knee injury that by all accounts now is looking good, healing well. I think he's going to have a pro day in May, I want to say. So maybe not May. I think this month actually. Excuse me. So I think we're going to see him work out. So his name might generate some buzz again. But I really liked his film. And the other piece is he's only had really 1.5 year of really good film. He was a starter at Ohio State after transferring from San Diego State in 2023. He was, decent player, but this past year he took a significant jump. He was dominant over the first 4 or 5 games of the year, and then he got hurt. So just a little bit more questions in his evaluation than the other two. But those three, to me, kind of stick out above the rest. And then there's some other guys that are solid, but not really like first-round caliber, in my opinion.
When you do your evaluation, so guards are interchangeable to me. I played offensive guard. I played both right guard and left guard. But tackles, it's a kind of a different animal. If you're a right tackle and you become accustomed to right-handed feet, right-handed stance and then left tackle is a different type of a balance to it. Do you look specifically at right and left tackles as being exclusive, or do you think tackles, if they played right in college, they can play left in the pros, or vice versa?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it's hard to speak generally to that. I think you really have to go case by case on that. Just either talking to the player, the coaches, things around him, just trying to get a feel of his background, going back to high school, what he played, how they practice, are they repping on both sides all the time? Are they training on both sides? I know Will Campbell has been training with Duke Manyweather, for the combine, as Membu did as well. They both trained with Duke in Dallas for the last several months, and they're cross training every day. So it kind of depends on that. I think generally speaking, you don't want to move a guy's sides in an ideal scenario. You want to keep them on the same side because of some of the things you mentioned, sort of that ingrained, muscle memory, and those ingrained movement patterns are sometimes difficult to break. It takes time. I think it's a timing thing, though. If you say, you're drafting a guy who's played left tackle his whole career like Will Campbell, and you say day one, okay, we want you on the right because we have a left tackle, and you give him 4 months to do it, then that's feasible, especially for a young guy. It's sometimes we see guys say, like, I don't know, 2 weeks before the season, all right, we got to move your sides. That's a whole different ball game as opposed to you got 4 months. So I think that's a big piece of it. I think as long as you have a plan in place and you have the timing aspect on your side, and the player is able to prepare and get there, I think it's a feasible option, if it's in that sort of scenario.
Thank you to our partners, CDW and Lenovo, who make amazing happen. Learn more at cdw.com/Lenovo. Brandon Thorn, our guest here on the Bears Etc. podcast. A couple questions raised. First of all, a thought. the two of you in a room would be amazing because that's all Tom does is talk about O-line play and what happens on that side of the ball. As you know, a Super Bowl winning Bears guard for the 85 Bears. He's got very strong thoughts and opinions on it. And but you mentioned Duke. You mentioned another gentleman who does offensive line training, but I think a Tunch Ilkin at a time. Chuck Smith on the defensive side of the ball. Mm-hmm. Tom, do you remember, were there guys out there when you were coming out of college that trained offensive linemen in the offseason to get ready for a draft? Because to me, this is on the newer fringe. I mean, you got speed coaches all over and quarterback coaches all over, but offensive line coaches in the offseason, I think this is a newer development. What do you think?
Yeah, there was nothing specialized like that. And like we had 3 combines we had to go to. So it wasn't, you didn't have an entire offseason to work for one combine. You had to go to 3 different combines. And so the evaluation process continued, and you really, you didn't have the hireable guys in the offseason to kind of refine your craft depending upon what position you played.
Brandon, is this a significant development, you think? Do these guys get a lot out of it getting ready?
I believe so, yeah. I mean, it is a relatively new thing, I'd say, over the last 10 years or so. And really over the last, 6-7 years, it's gained a lot of traction. But I believe so. You just kind of, the proof is in the pudding, so to speak, especially with Duke and what he's been doing over the last 4 or 5 years. A lot of first-round picks, a lot of second-round picks, a lot of guys who have second contracts, lucrative second contracts, even third contracts now. That he's been doing it long enough to get to that point. And it's just, it's such a cool environment. I've been working with Offensive Line Masterminds, the event that they have every July for the last 8 years. So I've been in every one of those and done the film work for that. And I've been in the room, so to speak, with hundreds and hundreds of NFL offensive linemen, Hall of Famers, all that stuff. And getting to listen to them be in the same room together. It's really kind of like one giant offensive line room that we get to do every year, which is really cool for me to be a part of, especially. But I think that's a huge benefit as well. When you're training as a collegiate player or somebody who just got drafted with a guy with 4 all pros, 4 all pros like Teron Armstead, multiple all pros like Rashawn Slater. These are guys that train with Duke. So you're training with guys who have all pros, Pro Bowlers, sometimes Super Bowl rings. Trey Smith has 3 rings. He trains with Duke. So if you're a guard, just getting drafted in the NFL and you got Trey Smith there with 3 rings, Pro Bowls, all pros, all this sort of stuff. And he's training right next to you. And, in downtime, when you're not doing drills, you could pick his brain and then you could apply it, pick his brain, apply it, watch video, and do all this sort of stuff with all these guys who have skins on the wall, so to speak. I mean, it's a valuable thing, I think, for sure.
Of course, our friend Olin Kreutz of the former Bears center works those guys out every day. Yep. Olin does a great job with those guys in the weight room as well. All right, so let's get down to brass tacks. What did you think about the Bears reinventing the entire inside of their offensive line in 1 week?
Yeah, I mean, I'm never going to complain when a team, invests heavily in the trenches, offensive, defensive line, especially the offensive line when you have a young, promising quarterback entering, just the second year of his career. This is a vital time in his development. And I think the quarterback's best friend is really having good protection in front of him. Players he could trust, players he could gain comfort with, have firm pockets to operate in, just that extra, second here and there, to find receivers and allow guys to uncover, that sort of thing. And I think that, building that sort of infrastructure around the quarterback and providing him an efficient running game and all that, it all starts inside, with the line of scrimmage. And if you could control that, I think you have that much better of a chance of winning games. So, I mean, they went out and they got a guy in Joe Thuney who has 5 rings at this point, 4 or 5 rings. 4 rings. He's been to 6 Super Bowls, I want to say. And all pro. I thought he was the best left guard in football last year. And then he kicked out to left tackle and did what he did there. He was serviceable there. But he's a guy who's played left tackle prior to last year as well. Another guy, collegiate left tackle, excellent guard in the NFL. But Thuney, the resume speaks for itself. He's the leader of the room now, and I don't think you could get much better than that. So I love that addition. I think that's a home run, at this point. And then Drew Dahlman at center, extremely quick, plays with really good leverage. He recovers well, gets out of compromising positions at a high level, and he's an excellent zone run blocker. So I think that's a good pickup. You want a veteran center, ideally, I think, with a young quarterback. I think that could take some weight off of his shoulders as well. So you get that. And then Jonah Jackson is kind of the wild card. I'm a big Jonah Jackson fan just because the talent to me, the physical tools, and then the film that he had in 2021, 2022, I want to say, but definitely 21 sticks out to me. He was excellent. He was on the pathway to becoming a perennial Pro Bowl type of guard. It's just for him, it's health. And then last year was kind of weird. They played him at center. He never played there before. I thought the way that worked out for him wasn't ideal either. Playing a position he never did before. So going back to guard, even though it's right, he's typically left, will be a little bit of an adjustment. But again, timing is good here. He has minicamp, training camp, preseason to get used to it again. So I like the swing, that you're taking with him. I think that it's a good bet to make.
In recent history, when you draft the tackle in the first round, he's expected to come in and be a day one starter. But the Bears, as terms of their offensive line, they have to develop depth as well as they have to get some bona fide starter. Is there guys at the center or guard position that you say, God, this guy could be a second rounder or a third rounder that could come in and be a day one competitive player for a starting position?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In this class, just looking outside of the guys that are probably going in the first round. So, Booker from Alabama, Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. I'm assuming they're going to be drafted in the first. Then you start, okay, so the next tier of guys. My favorite guy would be Tate Ratledge from Georgia, right guard. He's a 3-year starter. Last year, best player on the Georgia offensive line, in my opinion, in terms of consistency. However, he did have an ankle injury, tightrope surgery that he had to have, missed 4 games. Came back in that 5th week, didn't look the same against Florida. Took him a couple weeks to get back. So last year, you have to watch the first 3 games and then like the second 3 or 4 games to really get a good picture of who he is. But when you watch Tate Ratledge, I think, at his size, really good size, and then number one trait for him is play strength. He's able to anchor on command. He's able to uproot guys in the run game. And I think that plays in the NFL. The play strength is legit. And then just kind of as a bonus, he went to the combine and tested like an elite athlete. So he has that in his back pocket. But I think when you draft him, you're drafting size, strength, and just a good, well-rounded player. So he's a guard I really like that you could probably get in day 2. Donovan Jackson from Ohio State, I think, is another really good option. Jonah Savanea from Arizona. I think is
Tom's guy.
One.
That's Tom's guy right there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think he's going to be a good guard in the NFL. I watching him at right tackle last year at Arizona. I thought he was a pretty good player. He gets tested off the edge a little bit. That speaks to a move inside. I think his range, speaks to a guy who needs to move inside. Sort of confirmed at the Senior Bowl where I, got to see him up close. He struggled, a good amount at tackle, but then his guard reps, he's able to, get his hands on guys quicker. Just kind of dictate terms to guys a little bit more, and I think that plays into his wheelhouse. Big, strong, physical, and then at the combine, he carries his weight really well. He looked impressive. He was moving well, so I think he helped himself at the combine as well. But yeah, I think he has a profile of a guy who could come in and be if not a starter, a really good backup. But yeah, so those 3 to me, I think on day 2, rounds 2 and 3, stand out the most.
Hey, Bears fans, Steinhoffels, a proud partner of the Chicago Bears, can now open in Orland Park. Steinhoffels is Chicagoland's furniture and mattress leader with the largest selection to fit every style and budget, and is 100% employee-owned. Shop in-store and online at steinhoffels.com. You mentioned something, Brandon, earlier about the dearth of offensive tackles in the National Football League. We always say there are not 32 starting quarterbacks, legit starting quarterbacks in the NFL. I think we can still say that. Can we say that about left tackle and right tackle.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I mean, not since I've been watching the league, like in terms of studying film, coaches tape since 2013, 2014, I've never seen 32 like solid to good left or right tackles in the league. I do a top 75 offensive lineman every single year for my Substack. So I kind of dive in and try to tier these guys out and try to get the landscape of the league every year entering the NFL. And I just haven't gotten close to 32 any of those years. Wow. I do think when you break it down, there's more talent at left than right tackle still. Right tackle is even more difficult to find a solid starter than left. I think, on the left side, there's about 20, give or take, in any given year that are pretty solid or better. And then right, I mean, it dwindles, around 12 to 15. So
wow,
that's kind of what I think you're looking at. Now there's some young guys there that can expand that number, but then old guys age out, young guys come in. So it's fluid, but I'd say that's a rough estimate.
Tom, would you agree?
Yeah. I think it's a great assessment of the position. I do have a kind of a question before we let you go is we don't have the luxury of talking to a true offense and defensive line guy. This is one of my favorite segments of all time. The Tush push. There's been a little discussion about this the offseason, and I think there's a little bit more difficulty the running the play successfully than Philly's getting credit for. What is your feelings about that specific play and the conversations that they've had this offseason?
In terms of banning it and things like that? Yeah. I'm in the camp of, you learn to stop it or learn to replicate it. Don't ban it. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I just think that's, cut and dry, pretty simple. I mean, they've achieved an advantage, an edge that other teams haven't been able to replicate. I don't see why you would want to punish them for that. So I say just let them keep doing it and other teams try to replicate it. In terms of how they execute it, I don't know all the inner workings of it. I think one thing when I look at it just from an outside observer that they have that other teams don't have, aside, of course, they have a great offensive line, but the quarterback is really the differentiator to me in a lot of this because Jalen Hurts, the way he's built, first of all, it's very different than like a Lamar Jackson, who's more angular and lean. I mean, Jalen Hurts is a little bit more stout in terms of his build. I mean, the dude squats like 600-700 pounds or whatever it is. He's strong, stout, and I think that is kind of, we're talking about inches here, the difference between them doing it and others. And I think that little bit of drive and leverage that he's able to provide is probably a big difference that not a lot of other teams can replicate with their personnel at quarterback. So I think that's part of it. I think all of that, combined is kind of how they're achieving it. And that's my stance on it.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement. It would be no different than, somebody trying to deal with, Power O. Hey, we run it every time. Stop it. Or, your counter pinch OT, Tommy, or, the Lombardi sweep. It sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
They invented a play that you stop it, then we'll stop running it. But, you make a great point. The quarterback does make a difference in that for sure. All right, Brandon, we're going to let you go. Where can fans find your material? Let us know.
Yeah, so you could go to trenchwarfare.substack.com and you could subscribe to my work there. I do a lot of different stuff with college and pro evaluation, both offensive and defensive line. That's kind of my personal source of content that I direct and produce and do everything there. And then if you want to read any of my college scouting reports, you could go to Bleacher Report, just Bleacher Report, Brandon Thorn, and, on Google, whatever, and you could find, I've been with them for 5 years. So any offensive lineman that's got drafted over the last 5 years, I have a scouting report on them online. So people could go check out my work there as well.
All right. We'll be regurgitating some of your information on draft night, and we will give you credit, Brandon. You do a great job. Tommy, you got a final thought?
No, I was going to show him the old version of a jersey.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, he gets a kick out of this, Brandon. I don't know why. Well, he does that. We got to tell you that this podcast is brought to you by the official beer partner of your Chicago Bears. Tastes like Miller Time, Chicago. Go to MillerLite.com/BearsPod to find delivery options near you. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces. Tom, it's show and tell time.
This is the jersey that I wore in the Super Bowl. And see this?
Wow.
It used to tuck under, and then we would button it right there, so it would never come out or we would never get grabbed.
A onesie. Did you ever see that before, Brandon?
No, I didn't even know that. That's so cool.
Yeah, so that's the jersey I wore basically my whole career at the away jersey. But, yeah, we used to have that under tuck and then button and never got grabbed and, never got tugged.
Well, plus Tom was a weight room guy, so that jersey was not going to be budged. That was basically plastered on, right? And the number looked fake on his jersey. It looked like somebody took a marker because it was the 5 and the 7 were squiggly. It's like somebody had a little bit too much to drink and drew the number on there.
And what position on the line did you play?
I played right guard.
Oh, okay. Man, 57. It's cool to see. I didn't know that you were 57 before Olin.
Well, I actually took 57 because Jeff Van Note, who was the center of the Atlanta Falcons at the time, and my brother-in-law was playing down there. He was in his 19th year. And I go, man, if 57 can stay with the guy for 19 years, that number has longevity built into it. And so I ended up taking 57 and wearing it throughout my career. And then Jay Hilgenberg, who played next to me, was 63. So it was almost a reversal of numbers. But yeah, those onesies that we used to wear, I kind of show it to some of the modern day offensive linemen, and they laugh and say, no way. But the display of guys you have behind you, they're as good as you get.
Yeah, I'm thankful for those. Those were sent to me by the players, which just means so much to me.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, Laramie Tunsil, Quentin Nelson, and Ryan Jensen, 3 bad men.
Some of my favorites.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, one of the most surprising trades of the offseason is the Tunsil trade.
Very much so. Yeah, especially from Houston's perspective.
Correct.
Yep. Yeah. All right, that's going to wrap us up. Special thanks to our guest, Brandon Thorn. For Tom Thayer, I'm Jeff Joniak. Thanks for listening, everybody. Please subscribe now on the Chicago Bears official app, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Bear down, everybody.